All right. And Facebook is going. All right, we will wait. I hear me. Okay, I think about where we can go ahead and get started. Just as a little disclaimer before we get started, we've got a new guy that's on call this week, and we just had a major outage in one of our oil fields, and so I'm going to need to be kind of covering for him a little bit. Only much I can do. They've got somebody ran over a telephone pole or a power pole, but we've got a lot of equipment in the field that's down, so I may have to bug out once in a while. Okay, but for right now, let's begin. So let's open with a word of prayer, and then we'll begin our study tonight as we study the Gospels through the lens of the Torah. Oh, blessed is he who chose his people Israel from the peoples and gave them his Torah to be a light to the nations. Our Father, our King, on account of our Master Yeshua, in whom we have placed our trust, and through whom you taught Israel the way of life, open our eyes to behold the wonderful things in your Torah, and show us the way of eternal life, for these are the words that testify about your Holy Son. Please sweeten the words of your Torah in our mouths and in the mouths of your entire people, the house of Israel. And let it be that we, our descendants and the descendants of our descendants and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, all of us, would be those who know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. All right. So welcome again to studying the Gospels through the lens of the Torah. As I was saying at the very beginning, I do have I'm on call for work, and we've got a major power outage in one of our fields. So there's a possibility that I may have to end this a little prematurely tonight. But we're going to kind of hope that they don't get power restored until after we're done. And then I don't have to do anything until they get the power restored. Don't you love this weather? I don't know where everybody is, but I love it. It's the first signs of winter. Christy made hot chocolate, and so I got my Star Wars mug going and some hot chocolate, and I'm enjoying it. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. So last week we were discussing the lady at the Samaritan woman at the well, and we discussed several very important topics. I encourage you, if this is your first time tuning in, these are all recorded. They're on my Facebook page. They're on YouTube. Just search for Clint Lanham. And they're also on Beit HaDorek's website underneath the audio sermons. We are getting close to being able to stream our droshes again. Currently, they are being streamed on Facebook. So hopefully the audio is coming through good enough on those. BeitHaDorek.org. Okay. I put the link to Beit HaDorek on the Facebook page. Hopefully the audio is coming through good enough on the little Facebook stream. We're just using an iPhone, but we're getting closer to where we have the right equipment in place to record those droshes and get those posted again. But in the meantime, the Tuesday night studies are being posted on BeitHaDorek.org. Audio sermons over on the far right-hand side, scroll down, click on that link, and it'll take you to all of our previous studies, plus a lot of the drashes, a wealth of information out there. So I encourage you, if this is your first time joining us tonight, make sure you go back and pick up some context because there's all of these lessons build on each other. And we've had a lot of fun with them so far. I'm really enjoying them. So last week we discussed the lady at the well. We discussed why it was so odd for Yeshua to be alone visiting with this woman at the well, and in particular in the location in which it is, remembering that the location is in the area of Shechem, and there's a tie-in with the woman at the well and with Dinah. And so you've got to go back and catch that tie. There's also a lot of ties in here with the woman who is not currently married, or the man that she's with right now, she's not married to, but she has 5 husbands. We discussed a question, a challenge that I put out for you. Is Yeshua omniscient? Does he know all things, or are there some things that he does not know? And so we kind of had a little illusion in this last week's parsha, or in this last week's reading, where he's meeting with this woman at the well, and he is able to tell her a little bit about her personal history, enough that she's able to tell that he's a prophet. Okay. We also know that Yeshua knew when the temple was going to be destroyed. He knew that he was going to be killed. He knew in what manner he was going to be killed, and he knew that he would be resurrected, and he knew that he would be resurrected, within 3 days. However, he does not know the day nor the hour upon his future return. So I've been discussing this with my buddies at Bait, and we've had some really good discussions about this. And Chris Modisette came out with I probably will butcher this, but he was talking about how Yeshua probably knew everything he needed to know at the moment. He was not omniscient, where he knew everything in his earthly form, and in the form of the man, he did not know everything. But whenever he needed it, God gave it to him. I think that ties back in with our studying earlier in the book of John, where Yeshua is given the Spirit without measure. And so he knows, but he can use that Spirit without measure. It's given to him when he needs it. So he knew that Lazarus was going to die and that he was going to have to resurrect him. He knew certain things, but he didn't know everything. And so that actually makes him, it makes him so much more, I don't know how to word this correctly. It makes him a man, but God in man form. I don't know how to put that exactly the way I don't think that came out exactly right, but it draws me closer to him because I know that he understands me and he understands where I am. So that being said, I don't know, that was probably a bad place to leave you, but that's where we're going to leave you. We are at the well. We have talked with the woman, and we left off. Let's see. We left off with, where did we leave off? So the living water. We talked about the living water and the fact that Yeshua tells her that he could give her something to drink and that she would never thirst again. We discussed the possibility that might have meant something to the effect of you need salvation, lady. You need to be immersed. He's actually saying a lot of things in this particular message. Later on, as we read on, he talks to her and tells her to call her husband, and he astounded her by summarizing her life within a few words. So let's see. I didn't get my Bible opened where I needed it to be, but let me get there real quick. So let's go back to John chapter 4. Sorry, I'm a little bit discombobulated. I had everything going just right and everything was on cue until power went out in that field, and then it got me all messed up. So Let's see. I'm going to go to chapter 4 and pick up a little bit of context. We'll start in about 15 and we'll read through probably about 25. And that'll be about the middle of where we're going to start tonight. So the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw." And he said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." And the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Yeshua said to her, "You have correctly said, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. This you have said truly." And the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." Actually, I'm going to stop there, okay? Because the next little section gets into something pretty cool. So as I was talking about him knowing things and him being able to tell her that you've had 5 husbands, some people on the Facebook page, David Venegas and Jason Martinez, started a little dialogue, and I thought it would be kind of beneficial. So they carried it in a different sense, and we need to understand that when Yeshua is teaching, and when
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri doesn't understand, when Yeshua is teaching and when God instructs, there's different levels of study. Some of it's on the Peshat. That means the very basic level. So the very basic level of what Yeshua is telling this woman is that her physical 5 husbands are known to him. But Jason and David took off on a different realm. They went over to 2 Kings chapter 17 regarding the origin of the Samaritans. Let me see if I can read some of this to you. So David asks, he says, "Was Yeshua addressing the historical idolatry of the Samaritans, having had 5 other husband deities, or 5 literal husbands? Or perhaps both were manifested as true in her life? I tend to think that it's not option B, then at best option A, mainly because the conversation shifts from water husbands to people of the Samaria and the Yehudim and their mountains of worship. It becomes about the fundamental differences between the 2 groups and not about her personal life per se." And then Jason Martinez, he jumps in and he says, "Rebecca, Rachel, and Zipporah all met their future husbands at wells. I have a feeling that this is what's happening. He all bowed down to. Time of her meeting with Yeshua at the well, her husband, who was not really her husband, would have been the Roman Empire. Just to guess, I think Yeshua is speaking to his bride, Israel, which is probably why she needed to be immersed." They go on with all of this conversation. It's really, really pretty fascinating what they came up with, and I appreciate them making those comments and that they joined in there. So there's different levels to what we read. So the physical was talking about her husband. I'm not sure that she linked what Yeshua was saying to the historical background of the Samaritans. Although, in the very next verse, she's going to jump topic a little bit and go to some of the history of the Samaritans. So we'll pick up in verse 19. So the woman, after hearing Yeshua say this, says, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers," this is where she jumps topic a little bit, "our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." And Yeshua said to her, "Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know, and we worship what we do know. For salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is," we're going to talk about that phrase, "an hour is coming," and then "an hour is coming and now is" in just a minute, "when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." And I want to highlight, it doesn't stop at just spirit and truth. It's going to become very important. "So the woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called the Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us." And Yeshua said to her, "I who speak to you am he." All right, so let's take this apart and dissect it a little bit and see where we can go with this tonight. And enjoy that hot chocolate. Okay. So as she realizes that she is in the presence of a real prophet, she jumps into a question that's pertinent for her and for her people. So the Samaritans argued that they worship on the true Mount Gerizim in that area, and that's the proper place to worship. I think we touched on this a little bit last week. And the Jewish people, of course, say that no, the true place of worship is where the temple is. It's on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. And so she asked this prophet, deeming now that he knows the truth, he knows about her background. So in that case, stand by this for a minute. In that case, she's going to go ahead and seek out some additional questions for him or from him. All right. So with that, let's look and see what he says. So the controversy in her mind is a religious controversy. She wants to know who are the real people of God, who are the real inheritors of the promise, and who is right and who is wrong. You know, this is a question that we all want to know. And for those of you who are just joining, I'm using First Fruits of Zion, Chronicles of the Messiah as our springboard and giving us our topics for our discussion tonight. Boy. And so, sorry, a little bit distracted. I probably shouldn't have done this teaching this evening with all the other stuff that's going on. So if it's not making sense, I apologize. Maybe we have to redo it. All right. So she wants to know who's right, the Jews or the Samaritans. And Yeshua comes down and he soundly and firmly affirms the Jewish side of the argument with a ringing endorsement for Judaism. Okay, he says that salvation is of the Jews. This brings to mind for me a passage in Romans chapter 3, verse 1. Hang on just a second. I need to make sure I'm not missing. I have acknowledged all of these alerts and they just keep sending and sending and sending. So hang on. Now, I don't know why it's doing that. Maybe it's just trying to play catch up. Okay. Romans chapter 3, verse 1. And this is a passage that I love. Romans chapter 3, verse 1, Paul says, then what advantage has the Jew, or what is the benefit of circumcision? Great in every aspect. First of all, they were entrusted with the oracles of God. The oracles of God, those are the prophets, the words of God, the sayings of God. So the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. What then? If some did not believe, their unbelief will not nullify the faithfulness of God, will it? May it never be. Rather, let God be found true through every man, though every man be found a liar, as it is written, that you would be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged. So Paul is saying, what advantage has the Jew? Much in every way. They were entrusted with the oracles of God. And Yeshua says salvation came from the Jews. And so the importance of the Jew is very important. So who's right, who's wrong? The Jew is right, not the Samaritan. As Yeshua starts talking about this, he says, you worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. So they're worshiping. The Samaritans are an interesting breed. They do not uphold the prophets. They don't read any from Isaiah or from Jeremiah. None of the prophets. They don't uphold any of those, and they don't uphold anything that the sages of the rabbis would teach as well. So all they do is they take the first 5 books of the Torah, and they only use that, and then they have a different rendition of those 5 books that they also use, but it's different. It's a little bit different from what we would associate. Really, our argument's interesting because it's very similar to an argument between a Christian and a Jew. The Christians would say, "So what is the importance of the Jew?" We know as a Christian body that there's importance to the Jewish people because our master was a Jew. But for some reason in the Christian church, we have decided that that's where the importance of Jewishness ends. is with the life of Yeshua. For some reason, in our Christian beliefs and in our Christian movements, we've gotten the idea that once Yeshua died on the cross and was resurrected, he came back as something totally different, and that God's covenant that he made with the Jewish people has somehow switched from them to the Christians. And this is a concept that we've got to get past. And we're going to read some of it here in a minute, but even in Jeremiah 31, which talks about the new covenant that's going to be written on our heart, what covenant is he talking about? He's talking about the covenant that God made with Moses. That covenant will be written on our hearts. The Jewish people are still his chosen people. We, Baruch Hashem, thank God, have been adopted in, and so we get to enjoy the blessings that God has bestowed upon his people. But his chosen people remain the Jewish people. And so Yeshua is telling this lady, this Samaritan woman, the Samaritans aren't right. But listen to what he says, because he really gets into some really good meat that we can take advantage of and learn from. All right, so let's see. Yeshua dismissed the question of the correct place of worship by pointing toward an internal and a spiritual focus of worship. And I want to concentrate on this. I'm going to read from Lancaster for a second. He alluded to the coming destruction of the temple, saying, an hour is coming when neither this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. In view of the future cataclysm, the question of where to worship would become a moot point. Okay. So what Yeshua is saying is that something you don't know, young lady, is that the temple is fixing to be destroyed. In the next several years, it will be destroyed. And so whether you worship on this mountain or whether you want to worship in Jerusalem is not going to be important. It's going to be important that you understand who the Father is, and you're able to worship him in spirit for the times when the physical place of worship is no longer in extent. So in John 4:23 through 24, I'll read this. This is from the Delitzsch. I quoted earlier from the New American Standard. In the Delitzsch, it says, however, an hour will come and is even now when the true servants of God will worship the Father with spirit and with truth. For the Father desires worshipers like these. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship with spirit and with truth. Now, he says something good, and I wanted to bring your attention to this. In the prior passage, let me get my references back up. I'm stuck over in Romans. Let me go back over here to John. Let me see if I can find it. In John chapter 4, verse 21, he says, woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor Jerusalem you will worship the Father. Now, he's going to use this phrase several different times. But when he uses the phrase, an hour is coming, that is a future time. So it could be a future time that's fairly close by, or it could be a future time that's still a millennia away. But an hour is coming basically is foretelling something that's going to happen in the future. But then in verse 23, he says, but an hour is coming and now is. That's an important phrase where it says, and now is, because what that's saying is that there's going to be something happen in the future that forces these events to happen, but it's beginning to already unfold. And part of this can be done right now. So when he says that an hour is coming, what's he say? He says, an hour is coming and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. So right now, in Yeshua's time, when he's talking with this woman at the well, we can go ahead and worship in spirit and in truth. Okay, so he's giving the future. You're going to be forced to worship only in spirit, and you're not going to be able to worship on the true locale that God has placed his hand on. God said, this is where you're going to build my temple. There's going to be a time in the future where you can't worship there and you only can worship in spirit.